Welcome. You've chosen to invest in Convince with your application. This online training course is going to take you through the critical elements of an application process. Particularly, it'll take you through a resume and a curriculum vitae or CV, and what the differences between those are, and when you should use one versus the other. It'll talk about cover letters and help you with developing your own cover letter for each job that you apply for. It'll also help with when you need to address selection criteria and what the best form of doing that is. Wayne Gretzky said you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So you have to be out there and you have to be applying. Now, Wayne Gretzky is probably the greatest ever Canadian ice hockey player and holds many, many records. And he's talking about the game of ice hockey. But here we're talking about getting that next job. And I think the same thing applies. You have to apply for the jobs. You have to send out your resume. You have to write cover letters. You have to network. And that's going to be really important as you progress in your career. I've had lots of experience in recruiting, both as a recruiter, with an agency, and as a in-house recruiter. I've managed recruiters, and I know what recruiters are looking for. I've also implemented applicant tracking systems several times in my career, so I know what an applicant tracking system is looking for and what you need to do to get it past the applicant tracking system. I've also been a hiring manager, and I've assisted hiring managers. And let me tell you, they're looking for something slightly different than the recruiter is. So how do you appeal to everybody in the recruitment funnel? From the applicant tracking system, through to the recruiter, through to the hiring manager. So you really want to ensure your resume cuts across that whole spectrum. And you can only do that if you're tailoring your resume and controlling it. Because you can also think about the resume as being almost an electronic handshake and how you can introduce yourself to someone. And so it needs to be appealing and convincing. Recruiters are really busy people. They usually will have either a lot of applications for a job or none. And it seems to be, it's feast or famine. And if there's lots, there's thousands or hundreds of applications. And you need to funnel through quickly to find that gem in the pack. And so what you want to do with your resume is ensure that you're making it easy for the recruiter to find your resume and then to pass it on to the recruiting manager. So you're going to find there's a lot of information in this course that's going to help you. And through working through the different exercises and worksheets, you're going to find that you're going to become more successful and understand the whole resume process much better. So again, thank you for investing. You're investing in yourself, and that can be the best investment you make. In this module of Convince with your application, you're going to think through where are the jobs that you want going to be advertised, and you're going to come up. In this module of Convince with your application, you're going to explore the different elements of an application and which ones would be most relevant for you. Yes, we all think of the resume or CV as your application, but there could be other elements that you need to include. So let's think through those so you can start getting those prepared so when you are applying for roles, you have all the information and you can do it quickly and easily. Welcome. In this segment of Convince with your application, you're going to learn about my recommended format. We also have that format available to you in a Word document, so you can edit it and change it for your information. We also have a sample of a very simple one written out so you see what it looks like. So there's a lot of materials. Before we get in this segment of Convince with your application, I want to really focus on formatting. Formatting is going to be critical for you, and you need to have it right because you need to appeal to the applicant tracking system, the recruiter, and the hiring manager. So, in this segment of Convince with Your Resume, you're going to write your profile snapshot. This can be used for both your resume or your CV. In this module of Convince with Your Application, you're going to look at and develop the competencies that will go on your resume or CV. In this segment of Convince with Your Application, you're going to develop your work experience. Now, I hope that you have a list of where you've been employed. If not, one of the places you may want to check are your tax returns and how you prepared your tax returns. If you're doing a resume, you should have the last maybe 10 years of experience if you've got 10 years. I don't think it's necessary to include anything from the previous century, so from the 1990s, unless it is so critical and unique for that you critically need to have it for this job. My preference is that you keep it to 10 or 15 years maximum. However, in this section of Convince with Your Application, you're going to develop a list of your education. This list should include all of your qualifications, certifications, courses you've taken. So let's go through it. First of all, you need to include any university or college education that you have and what you received, what sort of degree. So in this module, you're going to do with the very last bit of your resume, you're going to develop the final section. Now, if you have received awards, recognitions, whether they're company awards for being Employee of the Month, or in this segment of Convince with Your Application, you're going to learn my recommendations for how to organize and my tips for ensuring that your resume really convinces and appeals to everybody in the recruitment funnel. Let's start. In this episode of Convince with Your Application, you're going to learn about the Job Advert Analyzer and how it can help you improve the quality of your tailoring of resumes and help you decide whether to apply or not. But first, I'd like to tell you a bit about a story about why I think this is important. In this segment of Convince with Your Application, you're going to look at the major ways that you can use the Job Analyzer. There are three main ways that I think you can use it. One is to determine whether you should or should not apply for a job. Two, to use it to tailor your resume. And three, for career development. Let's go through. In this segment of Convince with Your Application, you're going to learn about cover letters and how they should be structured and whether you should include them or not, and how to write a good cover letter. In this module of Convince with Your Application, you're going to learn about selection criteria, and do you need it? And how do you respond when a job advert says to address the selection criteria or include a statement of claim? In this segment of Convince with Your Application, you're going to learn about some of the newer forms that people are using for applying for jobs. This is video. So some companies are accepting or even requesting people to send in a video in certain circumstances. For instance, in this segment of Convince with Your Application, you're going to learn all about networking and when you should do it, the importance of it, and some ideas on how you can structure your networking for better results in your job application process. In my experience, networking is critical to getting that next job. And it's estimated that around 80% of all jobs the network plays some role in some way. Now in this section of Convince with Your Application, you're going to learn about elevator pitches and why you need an elevator pitch, and how to write one that's effective. And it's particularly useful for when you're networking and meeting new people for the first time. In this module of Convince with Your Application, I'm going to give you the highlights and a bit of a summary so you have some information about LinkedIn and why you should be on LinkedIn and how to get started on LinkedIn. And maybe even, if you're already on it, how you can optimize your LinkedIn profile a bit. In this module of Convince with Your Application, you're going to learn about why you should do an online audit on yourself, how to do it, and then what to do with the results. First, let's talk about why you should do one. As a recruiter and as a hiring manager, when I had a short list of names, I would always take each of the names and Google them and see what information I could find. And yes, it was a bit of nosiness, but it was also quite a lot about self-protection, because as an executive in human resources, if I wanted to interview someone, I wanted someone who had a good reputation and was not, their behaviors were not contrary to the company. So I can give you concrete examples of where I've seen photographs of people in their underwear, and I'm like, this is not what we would expect of our managers to be splashed over the internet. Or alternatively, I've seen them partaking in illegal drugs. There's pictures of them. No, I'm not going to interview them. Now, you can say that I'm stereotyping, but I've got a long list of a short list. I've got a lot of names on it, and I can decide how to spend my time. And if I'm going to invest time in someone, getting to know them, reading their resume, really preparing for an interview, I hope they're going to be the type of person who's going to ensure that my company, whoever I work for, they're going to be proud of it and they're going to display the right behaviors. So, in this module of Convince with Your Application, you're going to learn about how recruiters can find you. You're going to find out what you need to do and how you can increase the chances of this occurring.